These are the world's best wedges, but I have some criticisms. What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. I am holding two new wedges in my hand. I have been playing these for a while, and I want to share with you some of my thoughts on these because they're absolutely amazing. They have technology in them that nobody else is offering, but I do have a couple of things to critique that I don't even think Edel Golf knows about. So I went ahead and ordered Edel Golf's new SMS wedge. I don't even know what that stands for, but what is really interesting about this is that they look like traditional wedges. They are beautiful here. I think Japanese forged steel. But what makes these really interesting here is the bounce. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The front, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But then the most interesting thing is the little portholes in the back, which you think you have seen on other clubs, are more sophisticated than any other club out there. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you is that Edel Golf has some instructions on what to do with these, but I think the best benefit, at least for me, is something they don't even advertise. So, first of all, I have a 54 degree right there. It says it right on the toe, and a 60 degree. That's just generally where I've fallen with wedges. I like a wedge for flop shots. I also like something for a little of that bump and run right after that bump and grind. And what I want to show you here is that when you're ordering wedges, there are a few things that I am looking for. So the first thing I'm looking for is a full face of grooves, and this has it. Now, I will say this isn't the fullest face ever. You can see we have a little bit that is missing right here. So some clubs will go all the way to the edge. I think the Wilson, TaylorMade, especially the Callaway, they'll go all the way to the edge, but for me, this is close enough. What I don't like as much is when they stop where the traditional grooves stop, and that's because when I open up that club face, I do have a tendency to hit it right up here. You just don't have much loft, and so you tend to strike the ball up here for me, and if I don't have grooves up there, I'm not going to get the spin that I would and the control that I would otherwise get with a full face groove. So they have that, so that really intrigued me. The other thing that really intrigued me is the grind here. So what you can see here is this is all milled. You can see the little ribs. It kind of feels nice when I run my finger on it like a little washboard or something. This one is the D grind. The D feels good in your hand. And then on my 60 degree, what I have here is the T grind. Now, I want to start with the 60 degree because I think this one is actually a little bit simpler, and I just want to show you what it looks like because it's not real obvious on their website, and when you're taking pictures of grind, it's actually kind of hard to figure out where things are shaped. I actually would prefer that they use like a 3D computer modeled shot, something with like grid lines on it to show you what that grind looks like, but they have 4 different grinds and they have really good descriptions on them. So on this one, which is my 60 degree, this is the one I use around the green. Yes, I usually want to cut through some deep rough with it, but I do want to open up that shot. So sometimes I just set up square to my chip or my shot here, but sometimes I want to flop it on. So I open that sucker up and flop it on, cut underneath it, you know, kind of flick the wrist. And so this one, this T grind is actually meant for that. They also have a C grind, which is meant for the better golfer. And that's just a really shallow cut as far as I can tell. But what the T grind is to me, that kind of perfect balance. So what you get here, and I'm just going to rotate it just like this, is you get basically this front leading edge that almost looks like a wing. You can see here that you get this really high bounce front edge, and that actually reminds me a lot of the JP Premier wedge. It was actually the first wedge that really had kind of this blunt front end, so a lot of high bounce. They don't advertise the bounce numbers. There's no consistency in the way bounce is calculated, so I actually appreciate that, but it's just a really rounded edge here. Many wedges have a really sharp like blade there, and I tend to cut into the ground and take toupees with them, so I love that. So right here, it's just really rolled. You can't even feel it. It feels nice on the hand because it's so rolled. And then we have a pretty high leading edge bounce there. You can almost see that it's like double tiered, so we get kind of a little bit more of this upright angle right there, and then it starts to flatten out where the second grind is cut out, so you can kind of see how that looks. It's almost like 3 tiers but with really sharp edges on them, so you get a really high bounce leading edge, and then it kind of tapers back to kind of this negative angle right here. So the top of the bounce is right in line with the shaft there, so you have really nice high bounce up to that point. Now the benefit of this is that yes, if I'm square, I still get a lot of bounce here, but if I open this up, you know, i.e. if my shaft is leaning back here, right, what we get is the ability to open this up without lifting the club up. If you have a lot of bounce and a trailing flange that still goes really deep, when you open that up, you start to lift the club off the ground, and so it's harder to do those flop shots. What you want is a club that you can open up and stays relatively flat to the green. So the C grind, I believe that's the C grind in that case, or the T grind here will still give you that feature, but this one will give you some more of that high bounce to kind of give you some forgiveness forgiveness, especially if you have a high angle of attack, especially if you tend to bend the left arm a little bit and you kind of come steep onto the ball. Well, this will help you. This will be your best friend. It'll give you a little forgiveness. So I really like that. It's been working around the green. In fact, a couple times when I've played with people, they've said, hey, let me see that wedge. What's that magic wedge that you're playing? You've got that flop shot. I don't understand how you do it. How do you spin the ball back? Well, this club has been doing that for me. So I really, really like this club. Now, if we go to the 54 degree here, now this is a club that I probably would use for more full shots, really half shots. I probably wouldn't use it around the green much for chipping. I'd use the 60 for that because I'd want the ball to stop. But this is for a little farther out, usually a little longer chips or pitches. And so one of the things that I will do here is take that 1/4, half, 3/4 shot with it. And because of that, I actually wanted as much bounce as I could get because you've got some speed coming down on the ball, and I'm probably playing this out of heavy rough. And so what I went here for is the D grind. Could stand for digger, because I kind of dig with those shots, is that it was hard to tell in the picture what this is, but I'm going to give you my description here because it's like a double bounce club. Now, if I just hold this up like this again, you can see we have that rounded airplane wing like leading edge, so it's actually flat, so it feels really good. I don't have any sharp edges there, so it's not going to dig into the ground like a blade. And then very similarly, we have it kind of rolled here, so we do have a lot of bounce. But what you can see here is that we have it retreating away, so the grind on the top is actually a cut inside here, and it kind of dips so that we get a really steep second level here. So it's almost like a ratchet. We get high bounce and then another leading edge of high bounce, so we get two of them. So if this doesn't give you all the forgiveness that you want, as it goes into the ground, this will get you out again. So does this work? I thought it might be a little bit of a oof, that you actually just might want a lot of bounce right up here, so that if you do catch this leading edge, that the rest of the club isn't going to dig in. But I will tell you what, I've been hitting this club out of some serious rough. I mean, rough as tall as my hand here, and this has been the club to go to because it just doesn't dig like my old clubs. So having a little bit of like a ratchet here, you know, what I'm talking about is like sawtooth blade, so kind of a high bounce edge and then another high bounce edge, I think really does work. It's pretty amazing. So sometimes even when I'm close to the green and it's really thick, lush, thick rough, I'll grab this because I feel like it's going to give me twice the forgiveness of lush grass than that other grind does. Now they have a couple other grinds. Like I said, I think the C grind is kind of more of your player's grind, and then one other grind there. So read the descriptions. Be self-aware what kind of golfer you are, what kind of swing you have. I think that's going to be the best for you, but I'm almost kind of curious. I would love to try some of these other clubs out. So between getting a beautiful forged milled wedge here with the grind that you need and the full face grooves, what we get here are some weights in the back here. Now, what's interesting about this is that one of the weights right here in the middle has a little red circle around it, and that means it's an 8-gram weight. Now, the two flanking weights, I believe, are 2-gram weights. When I pull them out, it seems like those 2-gram weights are maybe plastic, and that middle weight may be metal or tungsten. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about it is they are basically hex heads, so you would generally need an Allen key to get them out. But the way they have designed them, or at least the size that they have made them, allows you to take your standard adjustment wrench for a golf club here and remove them. Now, I will say that they come out relatively easily, which is nice because if you're at the golf simulator, you're at the GC quad, and you're trying to tune your golf club, you can take them out and move them around pretty quickly. So they have just threading on the kind of the top half. You can put them in there, start them with your hand, and then tighten them down. One thing that I will say, at least according to the instructions, is not to over tighten them. You don't need to tighten them in very much. And in fact, when I first removed them, they were very, very loose, but I have just kind of tightened them hand tight, certainly not as tight as you would a hosel on a driver, just kind of like that, till I can't move them anymore. You also don't want to wedge this sucker in there, so they're tight, like 1 inch-pound or something. And I've never had one come out. I've never lost one on the golf course, and I've hit these clubs a lot. All right. So what they say is that by moving the weights here, it's just kind of like the weights in your driver. It creates different steering forces for different hitters. So you're probably familiar with what steering forces do on drivers, and as far as I can tell, it's the same exact thing. If you have weight in the toe, that's going to slow the toe down, and you might find that the toe isn't coming around as fast. Now, if you are a person who kind of rolls your hands very quickly, you might actually want that to help straighten out that club a little bit. Now, if you are someone who tends to send the ball right, because the club is open, because the heel is coming around too fast, you might want to move that weight from the center to the heel so that the heel is a little slower to come around, right? So depending on if you hit the ball open or hit the ball closed, you can use these weights to kind of dial it in. Now, you might be saying, well, Pete, one heavy 8-gram weight and two light 2-gram weights isn't a lot of adjustment. You're just moving around 6 grams from the toe to middle or heel. Well, that's true. And in fact, wedges tend to be the heaviest clubs that you have in terms of head weight. And so you're not moving a lot, but just a little bit might help, especially when, for me, I don't really believe in taking full shots with wedges. Most of my shots are maybe quarter, half, or 3/4 shots. So for me, most of the time I can kind of just muscle the club where I need to be and I can just square it out. But if you have any of those tendencies, and for me, my tendency is to send a shot off right where the club just isn't closed up or I haven't gotten it square to my hands again when I'm chipping or pitching, it might be nice to make some adjustments here. So I wanted to see, does it work? And here's my first criticism. Adele says that 44% of people who were using their wedge, when they moved it, they had improvements in their consistency or their shot when the weight was somewhere other than center, which means, let's call it 50-50, that 50% of the people are going to see improvement. Now, I have seen them advertise a different stat, which I actually don't think is correct. They say that people will improve their shots by 44%. I don't think that's the right way to interpret that. I think that 44% of people, including you and me, amateur golfer, might see better shots with the weight being moved. And if you're in the other 56% of people that just want it in the center, then great. But for the rest of us, we never had really an adjustable wedge option. So I really like that. Now, I think PXG has an adjustable wedge, but you have to go get fitted for it. You can't make those adjustments on your own. This you can, and especially if you're changing things later, you're going to different shafts, different grips, maybe you're changing your swing, whatever it might be. I love the fact that you can change this on the fly on your own with standard golf tools. All right, so let me just summarize this and what I think is the right stat. About half of the people will find an improvement by putting the weight somewhere other than center. So I think it's worth trying. All right, so I wanted to see if it did anything for me. Normally I just buy a wedge off the shelf. You can't adjust it in any way other than putting maybe some lead tape on it. So I went to the simulator and this is what I found. Generally, with the weight in the middle, I was hitting them pretty consistently in the middle. And I was getting kind of my average distance on that. When I moved the weight to the heel, I actually did start pulling them left a little bit, just left of the center line, and so I could absolutely see that difference. Now, what ends up happening there is it was actually going a little bit farther than my normal shots too, because when that face is closed, it doesn't have as much loft, so I think not only is the ball going left, but it's going longer. Then when I put the weight in the toe, what it does is it slows down that toe so the club is open, and what I found is that, yes, I was pushing those shots off to the right a little bit, and they also weren't going very far. In fact, I was losing quite a bit of distance on them, and I think that's because you're adding loft to the club, so it's just going to fly higher and go shorter. So maybe you're looking to adjust the length of your shots, and you can do those with the weights. Now, my other criticism with this is that Adele isn't advertising another benefit of the movable weight system. So I want to grab my 60-degree here, because what you can do is you can contact Adele and buy additional weights. So I bought 2 more of these 8-gram weights. So what you can see here is I have red weights all the way through my 60-degree wedge here, and that's because I like my clubs really heavy, especially for a club that I might just have a very small shot. I might only be pulling it back 2 feet or so to do a little chip, a little flop shot, and I like a lot of weight there because otherwise it feels like you don't have enough weight cutting through the grass. So I like a really heavy wedge, and most wedges are just whatever length they are. In fact, for me, I trim my wedges just a little bit so my club is shorter, so I lose a little bit of that swing weight. So the way I've been adding that back in the past is just usually the lead tape or tip weight or whatever it might be. That's how I've been doing in the past. But because I can remove 2 2-gram weights and replace them with 2 8-gram weights, I can actually add 12 grams of weight to the head here, which is awesome. I love the feel of the heavy head. If you are someone who likes a really heavy wedge feel, well, this is a great way to do it and keep that stock look. So each of these weights here was about $10 plus shipping, and so you're looking at about a $20 upcharge if you're ordering it from them. You could do that at the time of ordering. They're advertising the effects of the weights on steering forces, but for some of us who have kind of overcome the steering force effects on the wedge, or they're minimal because of the way we use the wedges, just adding more weight could be a huge benefit. I would love to see Adele saying, hey, these could be the heaviest wedges on the market, because I think that's something that a lot of people are looking for. Now, the other thing that I've done here too is I've actually replaced The graphite shafts that these come with, I actually got these Kinetics by Paterson shafts here. These are like 95-gram shafts here, so those were great too. But just to show you how much I love extra weight on the clubs, I've gone ahead and swapped out my shafts with the steel fiber 125-gram weights. So that's how much I love a heavy wedge. Heavy shaft, heavy head, that feels good to me, especially on those short shots. If you are someone that kind of feels like they're flipping through, or the head is kind of getting caught up and dragging through the grass, I think you need a heavier wedge, because I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Now the last thing, and the thing I love most about these, is that you can spend some ridiculous money on wedges. I've actually shown you, I bought a set of JP Premier wedges. They're very, very good wedges. Those are about $600 a head for a wedge. And yet, the Adele wedges here, made by David Edel, an absolute maestro in the golf world, makes incredible clubs. As far as I can tell, these are second to none, man. The finish on these, the milling, the customization on these. In fact, I've got these 2 degrees upright, so I like to stand over my wedge shots here. So you can order them custom right out of the box, right off their website. I ordered the extra weights from them at the time I ordered. I put those in myself. And then they do have a large selection of shafts that you can select from, so you can order basically custom clubs. And I tell you what, if you get the basic clubs, these are $199 a club. How awesome is it to get a custom premium wedge for $200? I think that is absolutely a phenomenal deal. I mean, many no-name brand wedges that have none of those features are $100+, right? So $200. Now, if you add on additional features, upcharges for different shafts or whatnot, and then obviously $10 per weight if you want those, you know, they're going to come out to about $250 a wedge. So for me, 2 wedges for $500, I think was a phenomenal deal. I'm not saying that's not a decent amount of money, but I'm saying for as good of a wedge as anyone is making, whether it is Vokey, JP Premier, Callaway, whoever, you know, a lot of those wedges are more expensive than those, and they don't have the full face screws. They only offer maybe 1 or 2 different bounces. A 10 degree or 12 degree is very common. So you can choose from 4 different bounces on any of those wedges. You can put the weight wherever you want. You can really dial this sucker in. So I'm going to say this right now, as far as I can tell, these Adele SMS wedges are the best wedges I've ever played. Now, they may come out with something better. Some other companies may come out with something better. But for me, these are absolutely the ones going in the bag. It's not even close. And the price point makes them affordable to the average golfer as well. So if you understand the importance of the short game to the amateur player, then you are going to want the best wedges that you can get. So I'll put a link to these Adele SMS wedges in the description below. Peter Von Panda, out.
We can discover more and explore so much deeper. We can live better than ever, thanks to Peter Von Panda.